Welcome back, everyone. How to host an ancient Roman dinner. Let's jump in.
To know if you want to be a good host. But do you want to host an ancient Roman banquet? Of course you do. Well, there's lots to know if you want to be a good host, but first and foremost is you need a centerpiece dish, something to really wow your guests, like this ancient Roman recipe for roast flamingo. So thank you to Hungry Root for sponsoring this video.
We're not eating flamingo, Max. You're pulling my leg. That's gonna be duck or something, right?
As we learn how to host an ancient Roman banquet, this time on Tasting History.
Ain't no way we're about to eat no flamingo.
Now, whether you're planning on hosting a raging bacchanal with hundreds of guests or just having a small little dinner for a few friends, it is your obligation as host to provide some exquisite cuisine. And for the most exquisite cuisine in the ancient Roman Empire, we turn to Apicius, the great Roman gourmand of the 1st century. Pliny the Elder wrote that Apicius, that very deepest whirlpool of all our epicures, has informed us that the tongue of the pink flamingo is of the most exquisite flavor. Now, finding flamingo tongue turned out to be not so easy, nor was finding a flamingo in general. I'm no longer welcome at the LA Zoo. But I was able to find a recipe for flamingo from ancient Rome from Dere Coquinaria, often called Apicius, in honor of that famous gourmand.
Is that even legal to eat a flamingo?
And it says, for flamingo. Pluck the flamingo, wash, tie, and put it in a pot. Add water, salt, dill, and a little vinegar. Halfway through cooking, add a bundle of leek and cilantro and cook. When it is nearly done, add defrutum to give it color. Pound in a mortar pepper, cumin, coriander, silphium, mint, rue. Moisten with vinegar, add dates, pour over some of the drippings. Put it in the pot, thicken with starch, pour the sauce over the bird, and serve.
Sounds good. But you ain't gonna be cooking a flamingo, so what are you using?
The same recipe can be used for
How about a parrot? We're not using a parrot either.
Or parrot. So should you not be able to find a flamingo, a parrot will do just fine. And barring that, I suppose you could use a goose or a duck, which is what I'm going to use. So for this recipe, what you'll need is 1 duck or goose, 2 tablespoons of salt, a small bunch of dill, a 1/4 cup or 60 milliliters of white wine vinegar, 2 leeks, a small bunch of cilantro, 3 tablespoons defrutum. This is a sweet and delicious syrup of reduced
Yeah, I didn't know what defrutum was until just now.
grape must, and it can still be found today under the name of sapa or saba, but it is kind of hard to find, so you can use some balsamic glaze in a pinch. Then 2 teaspoons of black pepper, 1 teaspoon of cumin, 2 teaspoons of coriander seed, and a 1/2 teaspoon of asafoetida.
Notice how they're whole, they're not ground, so the mortar is definitely going to be a useful tool here.
Sometimes known as hing, you can find this in many Indian grocery stores, and I'll put a link to where you can get it online. It is very, very pungent. The aroma is until you cook it, and then it is like a wonderful garlicky, oniony flavor. And it is what the Romans used after they ate through their entire supply of silphium. Though there have been articles written recently that it might have been found in Turkey and I think in Greece. I've read the articles. It seems that it's probably a relative and nobody's really sure, but hopefully I get to try it one day regardless. Then 10 to 12 leaves of mint, 1 tablespoon of rue leaves. The Romans loved rue. It is
Never had rue that I know of.
a little bitter. You can buy it dried or grow it fresh, but it is an abortifacient. So if you are pregnant, don't eat the rue. Also, if you just want to leave it out, that's fine too. Then 2 more teaspoons of white wine vinegar, 1 cup of finely chopped dates, and some wheat starch if you find it necessary to thicken your sauce, which I actually did not. Now that is a lot of ingredients, rather complicated recipe.
It is a lot of ingredients.
Which makes me grateful for today's sponsor, Hungry Root, which takes the complicated out of cooking. Hungry Root takes
Hungry Root.
pour root of your choice to our duck who is masquerading as a flamingo. So the first thing to know about this recipe, as is the case with many in Dere Coquinaria, is it is incomplete. It's really, you can't follow it step by step the way that it's written. You need to know that this duck, or flamingo, is probably parboiled and then finished off in an oven. It'll make
Okay. Of course, this is 2,000 years ago, so it's not going to be particularly the same how we cook today.
make a lot more sense trying to recreate the recipe if we do that. So start by filling a pot with water and then add the salt, white vinegar, and a bunch of dill. And once the pot is boiling, then set the duck in and parboil for 15 minutes. Then take it off the heat and carefully transfer the duck to a baking dish, breast side up. Then chop up the whites of your leeks and stuff the cilantro and the chopped leek inside of the bird.
That's just gonna flavor expel.
We won't be eating these, they're just there for flavor. Once it's stuffed, you can truss up the back legs of the bird and then slice the breast in a crosshatch
Okay, so you're gonna score it.
pattern and poke holes into any of the fatty parts of the duck.
Deep score, actually.
This is going to allow the fat to render through and create a crispy skin as it cooks. Then set the duck in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 175 Celsius, and roast it for 30 minutes, and then take it out and baste it with that defrutum.
Yeah, it's definitely not done.
This will not only give it a sweetened flavor, but also color it just as the original recipe says. Then return it to the oven and continue to roast it for 30 to 45 minutes or until it gets to an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes, definitely, especially with poultry.
Then remove the cooked duck from the oven and let it cool a bit while you prepare the sauce. For this, you want to mince the mint and rue as finely as possible, and then in a mortar and pestle, grind up the pepper and the cumin and the coriander, and then in a clean mortar, grind up the chopped dates into a fine paste. Then add in the minced herbs and the spices, and finally the asafoetida, and grind everything together until it's well incorporated and as smooth as you can get it. Then add in the white wine vinegar and continue. Then this all goes into a small saucepan along with the drippings from the duck. Then set this over medium heat and let it simmer for
That looks so good.
about 5 minutes. Then the recipe says to thicken it with some starch if you need it, because I found that my duck just didn't give off enough drippings to make it, so I needed to thicken it up very much. Maybe if I had that flamingo, or possibly a large parrot, I would have had enough, but my duck, it didn't. But even though I couldn't find a flamingo, I think that this dish is going to be a real showstopper, a must-have item for any ancient Roman dinner that you're
We're about to talk about the history.
going to host. Speaking of hosting, just a reminder that I'm going to be hosting a river cruise down the Nile next February 2026, so if you want to sign up for that, link is in the description. As for hosting an ancient Roman dinner, here are a few more pointers to make sure your evening goes off without a hitch.
Here we go.
So you want to throw an ancient Roman dinner party.
Yes.
Well, first things first, how big do you want this shindig to be?
20 people.
Because there are really two ends of the spectrum. Like the Emperor Claudius gave frequent and grand dinner parties as a rule in spacious places, where 600 guests were often entertained at one time. But for most, this was not the norm, not at all. For most, and when I say most, I mean the upper echelon of society, the patrician class.
Yeah, because like most people didn't have enough sesterity to even have their own party for themselves. They were just working and sleeping and slaving.
Because actually most people couldn't ever dream of having a home big enough to even host a dinner. But for that upper echelon, well, most of them kept their parties pretty small. 9 invited diners was the ideal. But even with just 9 invited guests, a lot more people may end up showing up, but we'll get
+1.
to that later.
Yeah.
Now, when you are inviting people, you can use either formal invitations that you send via messenger, or you can keep it a lot more casual, even last minute. You will dine well, Julius Cerialis, at my house. If you have no better plans, come. You will be able to observe the 8th hour. We will bathe together.
Interesting. This must came from like Pompeii or something.
You know how near Stephanus's baths are to me. First you will be given lettuce, useful for relaxing the stomach, and shoots cut from their parent leeks. Lettuce and leeks, how enticing. Now you'll note that he suggested that they bathe together before dinner, and that was the custom. In the early afternoon,
To clean?
the patrician men of Rome would make their way to the baths where they could bathe and have massages before returning home for dinner. And because of this, it was not uncommon for many of your dining companions to also be your bathing companions, something that the poet Martial complained of. You don't invite anyone to dinner, Cotta, except your bathing companions. The baths alone supply you with guests. I've been wondering why you never invite me, Cotta. Now I understand. You don't like the sight of my bare butt. A surprising number of Martial's epigrams have to do with being invited to dinner, or him bemoaning the fact that he wasn't invited to dinner. To his friend Gallus, he complained that our dinner invitations are one-sided. When I ask you, you usually come, yet you never ask me.
Oof.
I shouldn't mind, provided you ask nobody else. However, you do.
I'm very curious where these are coming from. I know they're martial epigrams, but where is the source material?
Neither one of us, Gallus, comes out blameless. What do I mean? I'm stupid, and you're shameless.
Because this is like smells of like Pompeian, like, because in Pompeii, obviously, we did a video on the graffiti, which was very similar to how this is laid out here. So I'm wondering how similar it is.
Now, like I said, you can invite however many people you want to your dinner party. I mean, if this is a big banquet, by all means, fill the space. But for most Romans, and frankly I am of the same mind, a dinner party is for conversation. And having too many people can actually stifle the conversation.
Yeah.
As Plutarch said, at dinner we should not need messengers as in a camp, or bosuns as in a galley, but we ourselves should immediately converse with one another. The last man should be placed within hearing of the first. Another reason to keep the guest list small is how the Romans ate. And I mean...
yeah, how they were like sitting or slanted, per se.
Lying down, typically on their side or their stomach. Again, this only applies to the wealthy. Most people just sat at a table the way that we do today. Chumps. But for the wealthy, they had a triclinium.
That's what it's called.
This was a dining room characterized by a setup of 3 lecti, or sofas, in a U-shape with a mensa, or a table, placed at the center. Sometimes it was one large U-shaped sofa with an accompanying U-shaped table, but it was the same idea. Each sofa held 3 people, making 9 the best number of guests. Some larger homes might have multiple setups of these sofas in
Yeah, we saw that in Pompeii when we did a visual overview of it.
1 or more rooms, which would allow for larger gatherings, but still people were generally divided up into groups of 9. Again, Plutarch discusses this sofa setup and poses the question, why is there not enough room for the guests at the beginning of a meal while there seems to be plenty later on? It is the position of the diners on the sofas, for they lie when they eat almost flat on their stomachs so that they may reach the table with their right hand. But after one has eaten, he turns his depth, not his breadth, toward the board. So supposing that you have decided to keep your guest count to 9, it is all the more important who you decide to invite. And largely it depends on your own personality.
Yeah, like, are you part of a guild? Are you a noble? Who are you?
Like, do you constantly need the affirmation of others? Guilty? Well, in that case, you'll want to invite someone like Celius. When Celius spreads his nets for an invitation to dinner, take him along, he'll furnish your applause. Well said, hear, hear, bravo, shrewd point, that's good, till you say, shut up now, you've earned your food. But if you do invite a Celius, then you're going to want to invite someone who is less sycophantic, just to even things out. And this is the case with everyone. For every one type of guest that you invite, you should have their opposite on the list as well.
Of course, the balance of all these personalities were never perfect.
It was actually Plutarch's brother, Timon, who came up with this idea when he said, I organize the guests at my dinners in such a way that a wealthy man does not lie next to a wealthy man, a young man does not lie next to a young man, nor a friend next to his friend.
I guess to enrich conversation of differences?
Such an arrangement is static and does little to promote sociability. He says that if he has a guest who is hungry for knowledge, he seats him next to someone who is wise. And if he has someone who is on the shy side, then he'll be sat next to someone who is boisterous. And if I happen to see a guest who is rich and generous, I fetch a poor and honest one out of any old corner and introduce them to one another, so that the full cup may overflow into the empty one. That said, the ancient
That's really good, though.
Romans were obsessed with social hierarchy, and there was an accepted method of seating people around the sofas that upheld that hierarchy. Generally, in the U shape, the person at the top would have been whoever was ranked the highest, and then there would be the
Top meaning like middle, back?
guest of honor, and the host, and then so on and so forth, and it would go down. This allowed the ones of higher rank to, 1, be the center of attention, and 2, to have easier access to the food on the mensa. So it's to be expected that Timon's method of seating people not based on hierarchy, but based on ability to hold conversation, didn't always go well. There was actually one time where an honored guest was so upset that they didn't get their place at the table that they just refused to sit down to dinner.
Really, people were, you know, The same way they are today.
at all. Their loss, I'm sure. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that even though you have decided to invite 9 invited guests to your dinner party, dozens may show up, as I said before. Today, it is rude to bring uninvited guests
Yeah, very rude.
to a party, but in ancient Rome, it was expected. In Rome, there was a system of patronage where a wealthier, more connected patronus, or patron, would take under their wing one or often many clients, or clients, of a lower social status. The system was complex and it changed over time, but one of the obligations that a patron often had to their clients was to keep them fed. So when they were invited to a dinner party, they would often show up with one or sometimes dozens of their clients. Other uninvited guests that...
How was that not rude though back then? Like how did they accompany for that, for the amount of food and the table sitting and everything?
might tag along are children, other family members, even wives, at least during the empire. Earlier on, no wives, but later on, wives sometimes came. Now, you might want to be a little upset at all of these uninvited guests coming to eat your food, but I think as a good host, it's best to be gracious. It was said of Emperor Claudius that he always invited his own children to dine with him along with
Of course, the emperor would have unlimited resources.
the sons and daughters of distinguished men, seating them on the pillowed ends of the couches according to the ancient custom.
And it's not a house, it's usually a palace for him.
Another thing Claudius did was he tried not to have anyone be embarrassed, even when that person probably should have been embarrassed. On one occasion, when a guest was suspected of having stolen a golden bowl the day before, he invited him again the next day, but set before him an earthenware cup. I think that's classy, and I'm not entirely sure, but I would surmise that he was also classy when it came to serving another group of people who would be showing up with your invited guests.
Servants?
And that was their servants or their slaves. See, while it is expected that you provide food for all of your guests' clients, sons, daughters, friends, etc., it is not expected that you feed their servants. However, if you do, it is looked on as being a good host. But generally, if you do feed them, it will be in a different part of the house. And even those clients and family members and everyone, while they'll be eating in that room with you, they won't have a place at the sofa to recline. They can either sit on the pillowed ends or on the back or stand in the corner, so you don't need to worry about bringing in a bunch of extra chairs. Now, while your conversational skills might be top-notch, it's unfair to expect that to carry the burden of an entire dinner, so it's best if you plan some entertainment.
Yeah, some sort of entertainment, musically, dance, something.
Now, this can be as simple as hiring a musician or some dancers, or if you have the connections and it's in the waning years of the empire, some gladiators. The Romans would invite their friends to dinner.
Some gladiators? Where are they fighting?
And when they were all sated with dining and drink, they called in the gladiators. No sooner did one have his throat cut than the masters applauded with delight.
That does not seem practical at all.
Often the combatants fell dead above the very cups of the partygoers, and the tables were stained with streams of blood.
That just seems... I can't even imagine. That seems like Game of Thrones.
Just lovely. Now, this was not the norm, but some guests might appreciate the little blood sport after dinner. But a much more common and frankly easier to clean up activity that you could provide is a bit of gambling. Now, other than
Yeah, that makes sense.
during the festival of Saturnalia, gambling is illegal, but in a private home it happens all the time. Even the Emperor Augustus enjoyed playing dice games at his dinner parties. Though talk about classy, he used to give all of his guests 250 sestertii each to gamble with, so they got to be entertained, but didn't have to take a loss. Classy. But he was the emperor, and most people don't have that kind of cash to throw around.
I mean, Augustus was probably one of the richest of all time just because of what he did, but obviously it's really generous though to give people a head start on the fun.
Something much more affordable would be to bring in a poet to recite lines, or perhaps a comedian to tell some jokes. But I would caution you against reciting your own poetry and telling your own jokes. Martial had things to say about both of those. The first was about his friend Ligurinus, who was constantly spouting his mediocre poetry at the baths, on the street, during people's naps, and of course, at dinner parties. This and no other is your reason for inviting me to dinner, so that you may recite to me your verses, Ligurinus. I arrive, I take off my shoes, at once you have a huge volume of verses brought in with the lettuce and garum. If you don't confine your awful poems to the mackerel dish, Ligurinus, from now on you will dine at home alone.
Oof.
Harsh, but it had to be said. As for the jokester in his friend group, well, that was Poponius, who he cautioned, Poponius, when loud applause salutes you from your client guests, don't fool yourself. Good food's the cause, and not your after-dinner jests.
Dang. Very judgmental, this man.
Sometimes I wish I had the biting wit and social courage that Martial had when writing his epigrams. I feel like he was the Truman Capote of ancient Rome. So we've covered what you should do to be a good host at a dinner in ancient Rome, and with the jokes and the poems, we've covered a few things that you shouldn't do, but there are definitely some more should-nots when you want to host a party. See, while it was not uncommon to give the guest of honor superior food and drink at a party, in fact, it was expected, you, as host, should not be getting superior food and drink than the rest of your guests.
I mean, that makes sense even today.
Again, that ain't classy. In his satires, the author Juvenal wrote of one such dinner, saying, "Oh, and what a dinner you get! The wine is so bad that even new wool won't absorb it. The bread is so hard you can barely break it. A moldy crust of petrified dough that you can't bite into without cracking your teeth. Of course, the master of the house is served soft, white bread made from the finest flour." And Martial called out one of his friends by name for doing the same thing, but with wine. "While you were drinking pints of deep purple wine, Cotta, and guzzling rich dark opimian, you set before me Sabine wine which had just been made. And then you ask me, do you want a gold wine goblet?
No.
Who wants a gold goblet for lead wines?" I actually knew someone who did that in real life. It wasn't with wine, but with water. He loved this fancy Italian glass bottled water called Pana. It was the only thing that he would drink, and his refrigerator was full of it. But then when he had people over, he made them drink tap water and wouldn't let them touch his Pana. Wasn't classy 2,000 years ago, and it ain't classy now, I'll tell you that. But since you are watching Tasting History, I will assume that you are classy, and that all of the guests at your ancient Roman dinner had a fantastic evening. But even with all of your guests gone for the evening, your job as host is not quite over, because you surely have leftovers. And as a Roman, it is your duty to pack up those leftovers and give them to the less fortunate.
Aww.
As Plutarch said, it is disrespectful to throw away food left over after we have had our fill.
And I think, I mean, as a society, we don't do this enough. However, there's not enough social systems in place in rural society. In city society, sure, but in rural societies, there's not any systems in place, really.
It is just as bad as if you were to hide a stream after quenching your thirst from it, or to destroy a road sign after you yourself had made use of it. But before I can have any leftovers to pack up, I should at least try this duck, prepared as you would a flamingo. And here we are. Ancient Rome.
It looks so good. The presentation's beautiful. Cilantro, the dill, sauce.
Roman duck masquerading as an ancient Roman flamingo. Now the recipe says to pour the sauce all over the duck, but frankly, I think the duck is so pretty that I just put it into a little golden bowl for dipping. And dipping sauces, that was actually more common than pouring it over in ancient Rome at parties.
It's more practical, less messy.
You would dip. So, got some duck, and I'm dipping lots of sauce here. That's really good.
Probably like a roasted feel with like a sweet, herby sauce. I always say Thanksgiving when we talk about this type of stuff, but very Thanksgiving-y.
So the duck is perfect. I thought it would be overcooked. I was a little bit worried, but it's not. It's wonderfully delicious.
So it's not dry.
The skin is very nice. I wouldn't call it crispy, but it's crisp-ish, halfway to crispy. But it's the sauce that's the star, honestly. It's sweet at first from all those dates, but then you get such an savoriness from all of those spices and the herbs, none of which really jump out. Even the asafoetida, even the mint, both of which
Very balanced, it sounds like.
can easily be overpowering. They're all together in this, and it's just unctuous. Like all of the drippings just kind of coats your mouth. It's very, very luxurious, but really, really good. This might be my favorite Roman sauce that I've made. And I've made a lot of
Better than garum, even though that's not really a sauce. It could be a condiment.
Roman sauces, but this one is really, really good.
Garum is not good.
Plus, I like duck. So honestly, you could make this with any bird, I think. I
Flamingo is probably best.
think it really works well with duck because it is kind of a darker, fattier meat rather than a chicken, but I think it would work with chicken. I think it would work with pretty much anything. The sauce is the star, absolutely. I'm curious what flamingo would taste like. I know that they
If you've had flamingo, you have to comment below.
still eat it in some parts of the world, and from what I've heard, it's actually not very good. But the Romans loved it, so, you know.
I guess it's just how it's raised, too.
Who knows? But maybe one day I'll try flamingo. Probably not. I don't know that I could do it. Anyway, we might see some flamingos as we cruise down the Nile.
It's just going to talk about the ad now at the end. But let's go back to that still shot of that beautiful duck that he created. Wow. Looks really good. I'd eat this in a heartbeat. I'd eat it. I'd eat the whole thing. The whole thing. Looks amazing. So let me know if you've had flamingo. Let me know if you had any context to the Roman dinner parties. Also, if you know where the martial epigrams come from, let me know. Peace out.